gonna go bike touring, probably the first thing you need is a bike. So what makes a good touring bike? What should I look for in a touring bike? So when it comes to touring bikes, everybody's got their own way of doing things. Everybody's got their own preferences. I'm gonna show you how I do things, what works for me, and what gets me down the road. So let me show you my touring bike. First of all, like me, my bike is old. It's a 1987 Miyata 1000. Even though it's old, all the components, including the wheels, have been upgraded. So what do I look for in a touring bike? Probably the most important thing for me is reliability. The last thing I want to do is get into a bike tour and have things start breaking on my bike. Bike touring is very demanding, not just on you, but on the bike too. Secondly, a touring bike should be comfortable. On a bike tour, you're going to spend countless hours in the saddle, and if that bike's not comfortable, you're going to be miserable. Don't get me wrong, when it comes to bike touring, there's always some degree of discomfort, but why make it torture? Another thing that I look for in a good touring bike are good quality components. You know, like brakes and derailleurs and levers and shifters and things like that. But bike touring punishes a bike, and having good quality components not only keeps you going down the road, but it makes bike touring just a little more enjoyable. A bike should be fun to ride. So let's start with the frame. It's a triple butted chromoly steel 56 centimeter 1987 Miyata 1000. This is the top tube, this is the down tube, and this is the seat tube. The bottom bracket allows the pedals to spin, and the headset allows the fork to steer. The chainstay attaches the bottom bracket to the rear dropout. That's where the rear wheel bolts to the frame. The seat stay attaches the rear dropout to the top of the seat tube. There's lots of options when it comes to frames. There's aluminum frames, there's titanium frames, and there's carbon fiber frames. But for me, nothing beats a good old chromoly steel frame. Chromoly steel is strong, relatively lightweight, and rides really smooth. This thing rides like butter. It's got lots of braze-ons for water bottle cages, for rear rack. The fork has braze-ons, so you can put a lowrider front rack on it. I use an Arkel lowrider front rack to match my front panniers. And I've just got an old Blackburn rack in the back. I love this old frame, but one of the downsides is it wasn't really set up for wide tires. About the widest tire it'll take is a 35, and just barely. Doesn't leave much wiggle room. But they just don't make them like this anymore. How about the wheels? A good touring bike should have at least two, and they should be strong and reliable. They have to carry you and your gear over a variety of road conditions, and a cheap set of wheels won't last long. I'm riding on a set of Mavic A719s. I had them built with Shimano 105 hubs and DT spokes. They're not cheap, but they're strong and reliable, and I've never had any problems with broken spokes or the wheel going out of true. The wheel bearings aren't sealed, so they have to be cleaned and repacked every once in a while. I like to start a tour with fresh grease and brand new tires, like a set of Schwalbe Marathons or something similar. If you were to ask me what the most important part of a touring bike is, I'd say it's the rear wheel. It carries most of the load and takes most of the punishment. So let's look at the drive chain. I think a good touring bike should have a wide range of gears. In a perfect world, all roads would be level, but we don't live in a perfect world. There are hills, and sometimes hills are tough and low gears come in handy. Actually, sometimes it's the hills that make bike touring interesting. Someone told me once that sometimes the best places to go bike touring are the hardest to get to. I ride a 3x9 setup. That is, there's 3 sprockets or chain rings in the front and 9 sprockets in the back. This gives me 27 different gear combinations. Of course, I don't use them all. I mainly use about 6 or 7. The number of gear combinations isn't important. What's important is the range. I need some good low granny gears for grunting up steep hills. And I need some decent high-end gears for cruising down long, gentle slopes with the wind at my back. But mostly, I need some good mid-range gears for riding on relatively level roads with average wind. In the old days, most touring bikes came with these huge front chain rings. I guess they figured everybody was a racer and wanted to get down the road as fast as they could. My touring bike is geared more like a mountain bike. It's got lots of low and mid-range gears. Sprockets are measured by the number of teeth. So if you're into numbers, my 3 chain rings are 42, 38, and 26. In the rear, it ranges from 34 teeth down to 11. This gives me a wide range of gear combinations to cover almost any road situation. 3x9 is not the only setup. I've seen 1x11 or 2x11. You just got to make sure that the chain is compatible with the number of sprockets on the cassette. In order to fit 9 or more sprockets onto a cassette, the sprockets have to be closer together. So a chain that's meant for a 5-speed sprocket won't work with a 9 or 11-speed sprocket. The chain rings are attached to a Seguino AT crank. The crank is 170 millimeters long. The pedals are just normal touring pedals, and I like to use toe clips. Again, I'm kind of old school, and I don't care much for the clipless pedals. The crank's attached to a sealed bottom bracket. I prefer a sealed bottom bracket because they're pretty much foolproof and bomb-proof. You just install it and forget about it. I'm using a Dior XT front derailleur. It's meant to be used with a triple chain ring setup. My rear derailleur is a long cage Shimano XT. It's really meant for mountain bikes. That long cage can take up a lot of slack in the chain for a wide range of gears. Make sure that your shifters and your derailleurs are compatible with your gearing setup. Not all gearing systems are created equal, and some combinations don't play well together. So try not to mix and match. So what kind of shifters do you like? Are you an old school friction shifter on the down tube kind of guy? If so, I can totally relate. Index shifters are nice, they just kind of click into place. Some people like their shifters on the end of their handlebars, what they call bar end shifters. You can combine your brake levers and shifters and get brifters. My gearing system is more like a mountain bike. I use Shimano XT mountain bike shifters. They're designed for 9 speeds and they match my rear derailleur and cassette. But I use riser bars that put me in a more comfortable upright riding position. The shifters are mounted just below the handlebars on modified handlebar extenders because there's not enough room for the shifters and the brake levers on the handlebars together. It's kind of a goofy setup, but it works for me. You should always have something to stop your bike. For that, I recommend brakes. But if not brakes, I'm sure eventually something will stop it. There are several kinds of brakes. My bike has cantilever brakes. Very effective, but kind of old school. My Trek bike has what they call V-brakes. To me, they kind of look like modified cantilever brakes, and they're also very effective. Most new touring bikes have disc brakes. Disc brakes are very effective, especially in wet riding conditions. When it comes to bike parts, there's lots of options, and what ends up on your bike is a matter of personal preference. And that is so true, especially when it comes to your handlebars and your seat. Handlebars give you something to hold on to. Your seat gives you something to sit on. Everybody's got their favorite handlebars and their favorite seat. Like most riders, I started on drop bars, and I spent years leaning on my hands and mostly staring at the pavement 3 feet in front of my bike. After a while, I turned my drop bars up to take the pressure off my hands. Some people call it gangster style. I then changed to flat mountain bike bars with a slight rise. For me, comfort's the key, and that's why now I ride with these crazy riser bars. I've got some neck and shoulder issues that almost prevent me from riding, so this setup takes all the pressure off my hands and allows me to ride. I also have a flexible shock-absorbing handlebar stem that takes some of the bumps out of the road. That way my arms and shoulders don't have to act like shock absorbers anymore. It's not the most efficient riding position, but it lets me ride in comfort. I love my riser bars. They put me in an upright position and I can view the scenery better. Probably the most personal piece of equipment is the saddle. Everyone has their favorite saddle. There are saddles designed to fit the rear end of a guy, and there are saddles designed to fit the rear end of a girl, you know, because they're different. Well, probably best not to mix and match. Don't skimp and get a cheap saddle. The wrong saddle can be really uncomfortable and make bike touring miserable. I ride on a Terry Liberator seat. I love it. I've got a cat-eye cyclo computer mounted on my handlebars. Keeps track of my speed and mileage. Anytime I'm riding on paved roads with motorized traffic, I use a rearview mirror. I like to know what's coming up behind me. Do you like fenders? I don't. I know some people love them. I tried them once. Yeah, just once. I found that in the rain, the fenders didn't keep my feet any drier than no fenders. If it's not raining, they're pointless. For me, the fenders just got in the way, and after one trip, I don't use them anymore. The Miyata 1000 is a classic touring bike. I've often called it the Cadillac of bicycles. Sheldon Brown, late famous bike guru, called the Miyata 1000 the finest off-the-floor touring machine of its day. It was one of the first bikes strictly made for touring. By the late 80s and early 90s, I saw a lot of Trek 520s out on the road. By the mid-90s, it seemed like you couldn't even find a touring bike in a bike shop. It was all mountain bikes, and there were a few custom builders that still made touring frames. And then along came Surly. For a while there, it seemed like every other bike on the road was a long-haul trucker. The long-haul trucker's been replaced by the disc trucker. I see a lot of bikers out on disc truckers now. Cannondale, Fuji, and even Schwinn have a fine touring model in their lineup. Or you can go real high-end with a Koga Miyata or a Kona Sutra. You could spend thousands on a custom frame from Waterford that'll take you around the world and last you a lifetime. You'll pass it down to your grandchildren. So if you're looking for a new touring bike, don't listen to me. I'm into old vintage touring bikes. Because, you know, I'm old vintage. But this isn't my only bike. I've got a Trek 520 that I really like. It's more modern, but I've never toured on it. I love my Miyata too much. I also have a couple of Surleys. I've got a Surly Crosscheck and a Surly Troll that I use for off-road and gravel riding. Actually, I've got more than a couple of Miyata 1000s. So what makes a good touring bike? Like most things, you get what you pay for. If money's not really an issue, you could spend thousands of dollars on a shiny new touring bike and get down the road in style. But if you're on a tight budget and you look around, you could probably find a decent touring rig for about $1,000 or less. Just depends what you want. They say that with a few modifications and a change of tires, a mountain bike makes a good touring bike. They're real durable and they're geared just about right. I wouldn't recommend a racing bike for loaded long-distance touring. The wheels probably won't hold up under the load and it's geared too heavy. They say you can bike tour on a cheapy Walmart bike, but how comfortable is it and how far down the road are you going to get before things start breaking? But if your bike is reliable and comfortable for the long haul, then you have what you need to go bike touring. Whatever gets you down the road. So if you're out scouting for a fine touring machine, look for a bike with a strong frame, a solid set of wheels, and a wide range of gears. It should have good brakes and tires with a comfortable seat and handlebars. There are so many possibilities. You're limited only by your budget and your imagination. But I hope this helps in your quest for a quality touring bike. As always, thanks for watching. Now go ride your bike.